It's like very nice looking with an E. Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. You have been fixed. Lucy's a
So
debater.
yeah, I'm Boy Meets Mini. It's good to be back on the Lucy show. It's been a while, and we've all missed you. and we were worried about you, going over to Ukraine. But
Thank you.
you did a lot of. It sounds like you had a lot of fun there. But not only that, you helped a lot of people, and that's huge. When creators do that kind of thing, it's massive. So,
Yes,
yeah.
I've been there
Um,
during the fateful day when the hospital was hit.
ooh,
Yes,
wow. Glad you're safe
I've
because
even
that
heard the
that was.
missile fly by, which is, I think, I might have to repeat the story again. I told it on the President Sunday thing that I promised someone that I'd go to the corridor every single time that there'd be an alarm, There was a day when the alarms became pretty frequent. So I thought to myself, I know I promised, but it's starting to feel like the corridor became my dwelling. Like I'm just spending time in the corridor. I felt, key's pretty safe. I know I did the promise, but I keep being in the corridor, and then minutes later, literally minutes later, karma happened, and I heard something fly by, and then an
Oof.
explosion.
I mean, I can't imagine. But yeah, you're very brave for doing that. And yeah, so but anyways, yeah, I'm a South Asian person, originally from India, but I do my best to cover the whole region because it's many countries, many languages, it's pretty diverse, and has a long history, I think, and it's a region of the world people don't like look into, whether it's current events, history,
Well,
geopolitics.
I
So,
believe it
but
sort of.
yeah,
Well, I'm not okay. Even that's not guaranteed. I believe it
yeah,
came a little bit on the radar because of the nuclear tensions.
yeah. There is that. There is the stuff. What's going on? Also, there's ties between India and Russia, which those are kind of historical because India was a strong ally of the USSR. And mainly it was because the USSR sort of armed the Indian resistance against the British Empire. So that's where that comes from. Yeah, so the that's where the Russia partnership comes from. It's a very long relationship, and of course now you see Modi bro hugging Putin in Moscow, and
Although there
you
was
know
this a little bit, you could say, awkward moment when Modi did the whole thing about when children hurt, our hearts weep. Basically,
it's
like,
fake.
yeah, but it was the awkwardness about it is that the whole thing was done. Uh, I'm not sure if it wasn't just a day or a few days after the children's hospital thing. So that was a little bit of an awkward moment between Putin and him, I guess.
Yeah, it's the fake sympathy. Like, it was it's basically what Netanyahu does in Israel when he said, the attack on Rafah was tragic. I'm like, look at yourself in the mirror, my guy.
Yeah.
And of course, the entire Knesset should be doing that. But yeah. But yeah, that's what's been going on there. I mean, I specifically wanted to come on today because I don't know if everybody's been watching the news lately of what's going on in Bangladesh. A lot of people say Bangladesh, but that's sort of the American pronunciation. I say the Bengali pronunciation, which is
Bangladesh.
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 Bangladesh. Yeah, you got it. It's not difficult. But in Bangladesh, there has been an uprising of students, university and high school students, because they are not able to find jobs. Just some statistics. So Bangladesh is a very populated country. It's about 170 million people. Yeah, right, yeah, 170 million. And the unemployment is so bad. I think it's around like 33 million people do not have jobs. 33 million people over the age of 18 do not have jobs. Like, it's a horrible unemployment situation in Bangladesh. been festering for a long
Very
time.
interesting that when
Yeah.
you see difficult situations in countries historically as well, students sort of seem to always be at the forefront of protests and trying
Yep.
to push a change for the better. Like if even I've discussed like a big protest in Poland in 1956, which is referred sometimes as the first crack in the iron like in the Soviet sphere.
Mm.
That it started as the protest of workers, but students very quickly joined in on that. You know, students are very often sort of very vocal advocates for fighting against injustice.
Yeah, and I think part of that is, when you receive an education, I think that's once you study enough, world history and geopolitics, and your mind starts to wake up, in the university setting, or if you have a teacher, say in high school, who actually, teaches you proper history instead of what the nationalist textbook teaches you.
Oh
So,
yeah.
but that's what's happening in Bangladesh, and the reason is because for anyone who doesn't know, Bangladesh, most of Bangladesh's employment is either in, obviously it's infamous for sweatshops and child labor, which that's true. There's also a lot of manufacturing, exports to other countries. It's basically the sweatshop of the world, or one of the world sweatshops, which it's sad because the British basically made it that way for a couple of centuries, and it hasn't really changed because corporations make massive profit off the backs of Bangladeshi people. Um, so there is that, and then on top of that, the government is pretty big. Like, it has a lot of jobs. I mean, there's millions of government jobs. And so the
Like,
problem in
you mean office workers, administration, or?
yeah, administration, there's a lot of military. Bangladesh also has a very large police force.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very authoritarian regime. And it doesn't matter what party has been in power. Like, they have switched parties many times. Because basically there is a right wing, far right conservative party that's like conservative Islamist.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the current ruling party, which they bill themselves as center left, but they are also really brutal authoritarians, and they really hate indigenous people, those who are not Bengali, basically non-Bengali indigenous people who
Yeah.
live in the country. So, um, yeah, it's just like, and of course, the way they handle refugees. So, in Bangladesh,
Yes.
has one of the world's biggest refugee camps. A lot of Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar fled
Okay.
to Bangladesh, and
Yeah. Do
basically, like
you
they're living in just horrible conditions. It's not good.
do you know maybe about more or less the numbers of the refugees? And could
It's
you
hundreds of thousands. It's hundreds of thousands.
maybe
It's yeah,
tell me a
six
bit
figures.
about the process of how they get to Bangladesh? Bangladesh, yes.
I mean, it's near Myanmar. I mean, that's like the next major country, near
And
Myanmar, and so a lot of
about
them,
their
they end
conditions.
up on boats and they come over, and of course, the Bangladeshi government, they set up a relief camp, or several relief camps along the coastline, and the problem is those relief camps are really authoritarian in the way they're run. Poor facilities. In fact, they deport a lot of people from those refugee camps back to Myanmar. So it's not like, just because they're setting up camps doesn't mean they're actually helping people. A lot of times they're doing more harm than good. But yeah, Rohingya people deserve liberation. And they deserve equal dignity, but Bangladesh does not treat them well at all. So, um,
So could you tell me more about what sort of
we got a map. Here we go.
yes, what exact conditions do they live in? Are they relegated to some sort of camps, or are they pushed into forms of ghettos, or
It's camps mainly. It would not surprise me if they were only allowed to stay in the country for. I have to read more into it, but basically, it's a temporary situation. Like they can only stay in the country, I think, for a few years at most, and then they have to basically go back or await UN asylum. So they're basically these camps are basically concentration camps for Rohingya people and for other refugees from Myanmar as well. There are many ethnic groups who are being who are being uh, I guess marginalized by the Myanmar junta. So basically,
Do they have
yeah,
legal
you have
status of refugees in the country?
I mean, they do, but they either will get deported after X amount of time. I forget what the exact amount is. But they either get deported back to Myanmar or they have to get asylum through the UN to go to another country. So until they get asylum, they're
So
stuck there or they get deported. And so yeah, refugees who end up in Bangladesh because nearby countries like Myanmar are doing genocide basically.
yes.
They just don't get a good break anywhere.
So hold on,
And
because they
yeah.
basically flee places like Myanmar.
Mhm.
So they receive status of refugees, but they get deported back to the place that they fled.
Pretty much, yeah. Or back into Myanmar. So as you can see, there is a border. If you look in the southeast corner, in Chittagong province, Chittagong division, there's a border with Burma or Myanmar. You can see over
Yes.
there. There's also there are a lot of people fleeing Myanmar for India, and India is cracking down pretty hard on immigration. They're trying to strengthen that northeast border that they have with Myanmar. So, but that's a whole nother situation. I actually came on to talk about Bangladesh today, but that is one of the main things, like the main injustices happening in Bangladesh, among many others, is this sort of you know um,
We're
keeping
setting up
down
a
of
future
refugees.
conversation.
Yeah, and it's yeah, and the government of Bangladesh. Here's the thing: the government of Bangladesh is very friendly with corporations around the world, especially textile makers, mining companies, fishing, rice, agriculture. There's a lot of rice grown in Bangladesh because it's a very wet country. It's one of the wettest places in the world, so it's perfect for rice cultivation. And so because of that, it is like actually central to world trade. It's one of the countries that is very, very important to world trade. And people just dismiss it as it's some small country in the global south. I'm like, no, it's actually very logistically, geopolitically important country.
How big
And I
of
don't.
an exporter of, for example, rice is Bangladesh?
It wouldn't surprise. I could check who are the biggest exporters of rice. I know India is probably number one, number two. China's pretty big as well.
Can you?
Let's see, rice exports by country: India, Thailand.
Thailand is
They're
pretty
not.
big. Thailand is pretty big. I know that.
Oh, Bangladesh is not up there. Interesting. I thought they were up there. Okay, they're like top 30, I think. But so I mean, for the amount of, I mean, they don't have nearly the land of say India, but
Right.
still, it is a major rice producer even then with the small land area they have.
And
But yeah, I mean they're significant.
with that, we've been checking export. There is also the matter of how much of the rice production goes to the, uh, you know, to feed the
You mean
actual
domestic,
yeah,
right? Domestic, yeah, domestic's
yeah.
probably the majority of it. So, because I mean, Bangladesh is crowded. It's 170 million people. Like, that's hard to fathom. I mean, that's what, about
I've just been
half the U.S.
given.
population? Yeah, it's half the U.S. population lives in this small country.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually
Mhm.
true. There's a lot of people. Like, for
Mhm.
context, Vietnam has, I think, a bit over 100 million people living in it. And Vietnam is, as you know, stretched, quite a stretched piece of land mass, right?
Yeah. Yeah, whereas Bangladesh is very compact, it's tight, and the terrain, like depending where you go, the terrain is either too close to water, so it's going underwater as sea levels rise, or it's very hilly terrain. When you go to northern Bangladesh toward like northeast India, it gets very mountainous up there. So a lot of the country's population is in villages in like the center and in the south, basically, because that's where the agriculture is, that's where the trade, the rivers are and stuff. So yeah, I mean, basically, um it's this very densely crowded country, kind of like Nigeria. If you see, I mean, Nigeria is very populated, but it's small. Bangladesh is very similar to that. But yeah, recently what's been happening basically is there's very high unemployment, especially of young people, and that's a similar problem in India, Pakistan. Like all of South Asia is basically has this youth unemployment crisis. I mean, I would imagine there's a similar thing happening in the U.S. There definitely is, but the degree to which it's happening is much greater in South Asia. It's like in India, I heard it was like 37% of young people are unemployed. In Bangladesh, it's even higher. It's up in the 40s, I
Do
think.
we have any
For
data on this?
yeah, I can get youth unemployment in Bangladesh, but it's very, very high. Um,
Like a
and I'll explain
breakdown.
reasons for it.
Okay, a breakdown by age brackets, etc. So we could get a full picture.
Okay, so according to the World Bank, which I don't know if I fully trust it, it's like 15%, but that's percentage of that's
Total.
between ages 15 and 24. Yeah, 15 and 20, between 15 and 24, unemployment for young people is like 15.7%, which is still very, very high. Um, so yeah, that's still not good at all.
I wonder how it goes with
And
different age brackets as well, like
yeah, I'll have
25
to
to
look it up.
30, etc. How it sort of breaks up along all the entire population, you know?
That, and probably you have to check on things like underemployment, right? Because a lot of people in Bangladesh, they get a decent education, but where's the opportunity? They have to leave the country. They have to go to
And
Europe or
is
wherever,
this
right? So
unemployment, how is that sort of number? What is that number based on? Is it based on number of people that actually register as unemployed, or is it just
yeah, I don't know.
how is this number produced by the World Bank? What
Yeah,
is that?
I wonder where they get the data because the Bangladeshi government likes to make itself look good. So I don't know if their own statistics are valid or if they cook the
Right.
numbers. It's
Just
very
what will
possible.
be the
Yeah.
criteria of uh, when
Yeah.
a young person is considered unemployed?
Yeah, I'm not
And it
100% sure on
starts at
the
15. Does that
policies.
mean that in Bangladesh you can just get a job at 15, technically speaking?
Um, I believe so. I'd have to look into how they. I mean, I know child labor is definitely a thing. Like on a illegal child labor is definitely a big problem there. Um, sweatshops and things like that. But as far as like official labor policy, like uh, I don't know how they like at what age can you be full time versus part time, right? Because like for example, in the U.S. and many developed countries, you have to be 18 to work full time. So whereas if you're under 18, you can only work part time. So, but I don't know what the distinction is in Bangladesh,
Do
and
those
also the lack of enforcement too. There's probably not much enforcement of it, unfortunately.
do those statistics of unemployment actually break down the distinction between full-time employment and part-time employment?
Yeah, I am not seeing that level of detail. Like I said, I probably have to find some academic um papers on that, but and just how they determine it and stuff like that. But basically, um apart from the unemployment issue, there's also one thing that's like mainly driving the student and worker protests in Bangladesh
Mm-hmm.
right now, which is that the government jobs are done on a quota system. So they have a quota system, and the worst part of this quota system is it's very rigged toward certain ethnic groups. And the other big thing, the main one that's really bad, is that if you are a child, a grandchild, a descendant of a veteran of the 1971 War for Independence that Bangladesh fought, if you are a descendant of a veteran who fought in that war, you have they have 30% of the jobs reserved for those people. So basically, yeah, if you're a descendant of a veteran, you have a much better chance of getting a job in Bangladesh because the quota system favors you heavily over other people. So
Veterans,
that's
yes,
the problem.
basically.
I'm sorry, what?
Veterans.
Yeah, military veterans. So a little history. So if you remember your history a little bit, Bangladesh was previously not its own country. It used to be part of Pakistan. It was called East Pakistan. Starting in 1947 after the British surrendered, and so then there was a Bengali nationalist movement that was in that time up until 1971 that was burgeoning. And so in 1971, Bangladesh fought a war of independence against Pakistan. And what Pakistan did also in that time, they did what's called Operation Searchlight, where they were trying to squash the Bengali nationalist movement. And so basically, in that process, they killed thousands of military personnel, as well as it's estimated between 300,000 and 3 million Bengali people and tribal peoples. So Pakistan did a genocide on the people of what is now Bangladesh in that independence war. So the veterans of that war are very, the government honors them greatly. They have, like, if you go to Dhaka, which is the capital, that's the capital city. In Dhaka, they have these massive memorials. They have a cemetery. They have it's very similar to what you have in, say, Washington D.C. with Arlington National Cemetery. They have something very similar to commemorate the Independence War. But the thing there is, all of the institutions in Bangladesh favor veteran, they have a very positive view of those veterans, and so it gets to the point where the job quotas, like 30%, so 1 in 3 jobs in Bangladesh is reserved for people who are descendants of those veterans. Yeah, so you have to be a descendant of someone who fought in that war, who was in the Bangladeshi army.
So what if you're a descendant and you don't meet the qualifications for the job at all?
I mean, that's the problem, right? So that's what starts to create that unemployment. And so that job quota has been in place for a long, long time, and it never got changed. And, 1971 was what? More than 50 years ago. We're talking 53 years ago. It's like, why are we still doing a quota based on a war that happened 53 years ago? We're already 2 generations removed from that war. It's like, there's no need for the quota. Just give people a more, give people a more, at least to some degree, more merits-based opportunity for jobs.
And just start sort of commemorating and respecting the people that fought in a sort of more,
I mean, they already commemorate them heavily. Yeah. Whenever Bangladesh celebrates its independence, it's a big celebration across the country. It's very nationalist. And so it's like, why do you need a quota system now for jobs based on that? It's ridiculous. So that's what students are protesting. And because Bangladesh's government is incredibly militarized and authoritarian, in fact, I'll actually post this in Discord for people to watch later, but there is in fact, I'll post it later here in chat as well. There's a documentary DW, Deutsche Welt, did on Bangladesh's anti-terror unit, which is called the RAB or RAB.
Is it safe to watch and stream?
Yeah, it'd be a good one. Maybe after we talk, it'd be a good one to watch on stream because it talks about but I don't know, it should be TOS friendly. I don't think you need to skip anything in it, but they talk about how Bangladesh's anti-terror agency basically goes after journalists and innocent civilians who demonstrate even the slightest dissent. So it is a very authoritarian state, and they don't actually go after real terrorists. They just they conflate terrorism with dissent, and that's what the Indian government does too. So it's all these governments in the Middle East and South Asia, they conflate terrorism with dissent, and they consider it all terrorism. And yeah. So, anyways, that's what students are protesting. And what Bangladesh is doing now, they have cut off all internet communications within and outside the country. So, imagine you're a Bangladeshi person, you live outside the country. You live in India, you live in Europe or the US, and you try to contact your family back home. It's dark. You cannot contact your family. Social media shut down. SMS, all that is shut down. All universities and higher education are shut down. And basically, the next step that the Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina, wants to take is martial law. Police are already, I've actually been hearing reports from within the country, from people's friends and relatives there, that police are they're using live ammunition. They're taking people from their homes who they think are dissenters. They're using explosives. They are, the death toll is already in the hundreds. And there's thousands of people injured in the hospital from what
Hundreds
the
of
police and military are
protesting
doing.
students, you mean, yes?
Not only students, just civilians generally. There's students, workers, workers who are striking. There is a larger movement coalescing with unions, with opposition political parties. Bangladesh is basically in civil conflict as we speak. And it's something I'm not hearing about enough on the news, and instead we choose to continue to dramatize whether Biden is going to step down or not. I'm like, guys, that's not the biggest issue. If Biden stays, he may not last his 4-year term. If he doesn't stay, we'll get Kamala Harris. Like, guys, stop making a big deal of it. Meanwhile, in Bangladesh, millions of people are under martial law, and you don't care. Not you, but the mass media doesn't care, and that's why I wanted to come on and talk about it today, because a lot of people who watch the show may not be aware, simply because of the media we all consume, that we're not talking about this, and the fact that people don't care about. I try to make people care more and understand more about South Asia and understand just how important it is to the rest of the world, because when we talk about authoritarianism, and I bring up Bangladesh, people will automatically tell me, well, that's just the way those countries are. I'm like, no, people who live there don't like the way that things are. The problem is, if you try to speak against it, if you try to dissent against it, you're going to get killed. Much more likely to get killed than, say, in the US or
that
Europe.
Is how authoritarian
it is horrible.
Work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That is.
Yep, and then they'll say, well, Bangladesh provides cheap manufacturing, and I'm like, that's all you see us as. You don't see them as human beings. You just see us as your cheap factory you could exploit. It's like, no, these are people, and a lot of these students, again, they have master's degrees. Bangladesh has, for all of its faults, a very robust education system. I mean, it is privatized. It's heavily privatized, but it has really good, heavily invested in universities. People get masters, PhD, and they leave and go to other countries. So, for example, I actually know a friend of a friend who is a doctor from Bangladesh. He did his whole, all of his degrees and everything and residency in Dhaka, and then he came to the U.S. because there were not enough opportunities in his home country. So there's a lot of people.
Actually surprised that the government, in its sort of short-sightedness, is not in the slightest alarmed by the sort of brain drain that it creates.
So one thing Sheikh Hasina says is that, and Modi also similarly says, both of these dictators say, is that, we young people need to stay in our country and rebuild it. Meanwhile, they have all these systems in place that prevent that from happening, and so then people end up leaving, and the brain drain happens, and so they don't have solutions. They just keep, concern trolling about it, and then on top of that, Sheikh Hasina, because she is so obsessed with her own power, Trump wishes he was as power obsessed as Sheikh Hasina, and I actually think Trump now is that power obsessed. If I talk to Trump about what's going on in Bangladesh, he would want to do exactly what Sheikh Hasina is doing right now. Because Sheikh Hasina is basically like people ask me, what is Sheikh Hasina's politics? Sheikh Hasina's politics is all about herself. Like she's not center left. She's definitely far right, I would say, as far as like authoritarian. But like she's all about herself and her own power. And the last couple elections, in fact, in Bangladesh, she has won like a large percentage of the vote, which is alarming because I'm like, that's not exactly democratic, is it? So yeah, I mean, it's all the signs of authoritarianism are in Bangladesh, and
Especially
uh,
now, it seems.
yeah, and it's all coming to a head now. There's literal martial law in the street in every city, not just in Dhaka. In every city, it's a lot of throughout the country. The army is getting mobilized, and special police units are getting mobilized. The anti-terror units are getting mobilized. So this is a horrible situation. What do I see coming out of all this? I mean, there is massive resistance on the ground. In fact, the state TV headquarters that's in Dhaka, that runs like the state television stations, it's been burned by protesters. Like they've already burned the building. So yeah, it is. Yeah, things are really going down in Bangladesh. I'm happy to see that people are rightfully resisting their authoritarian government. That they don't want to live under anymore. But yeah, Bangladesh is responding much in the way that Iran has done. When the protests for Masa Amini, if you remember that. If you remember the case of Masa Amini, who was I think killed by police for not wearing her hijab properly. And there were mass protests in Tehran and other Iranian cities. The Iranian government basically responded with bullets, and it was terrifying. And that's what's happening in Bangladesh today.
So I guess
And so yeah.
Continue.
But yeah, that's basically a rundown of what's been going on over there, and sort of hopefully some of the history, like why there's this quota system, why there's this very strong nationalism. And again, it's because of their very recent independence war 50 years ago, over 50 years ago against Pakistan. And the fact that so many countries trade with Bangladesh, depend on manufacturing there and slave labor and child labor there. It's like if you try to oppose those corporate interests and, of course, the dictatorship in place, you're going to get killed. So yeah, solidarity with the people of Bangladesh. I actually have a strong feeling that the amount of resistance that we're seeing there, like at some point, Sheikh Hasina is going to have to tone it down because she's just ramping things up to the point where it's full-scale civil conflict and martial law. So
Right.
yeah, that's not going to look,
I guess my question is, since
Yeah.
we all know what the situation in places like Iran is, right?
Mhm.
We've even, well, protests don't always go, let me just say, the way that they maybe should. It's not always a success. We've seen recently what happened in Georgia with the foreign agent law, with the protests there. It did not, unfortunately, end up as a success story. What do you think the trajectory is in Bangladesh?
Hard to say at this point. So Bangladesh's politics concern me particularly because so Sheikh Hasina is part of a party known as the Awami League, and the Awami League it bills itself as center left, progressive, whatever. But they, under Sheikh Hasina's leadership, has become incredibly authoritarian and even anti-LGBT as well. So they have shedded their entire progressive image. They are basically you could say they're like centrist, center right at this point, and they're very authoritarian. Sheikh Hasina's main opposition is far right Islamist. In fact, let me get the name of the party. Again, the reason I'm not as familiar with Bangladesh is I'm not from there. I'm from northern India, so I'm more in tune with what's happening in North India. But I still try to keep up with the rest of the region because it's super important.
I have a
Yeah, so the
few
Awami. Sorry.
informations from the chat. I believe they said they no longer accept refugees. Also, there was
Yep.
some information given above that according to the UN, the number of the unemployment was um, UN report actually says that more than 20% of youth are NEETs, 15 to 25 age group. So we have already a bigger number
Yeah,
from a
not
different source.
yeah, not in education, employment, or training. So they're just, they're just left. They're just, left in poverty, unfortunately. So there's a lot of youth poverty in Bangladesh because of, it's not just the job quota, like that's the spearhead issue, but there's like a lot of other institutional problems with the way Bangladesh, manages its society, basically. Um, and they no longer accept refugees. I'll have to confirm that. But yeah, and Katasu in YouTube chat actually brings up as of July of last year, 900,000 plus refugees. So almost a million refugees live in 33 camps in Bangladesh's border district with Myanmar, which is called Cox's Bazar. Cox's Bazar is down in that southeast corner, south of Chittagong. Um, and so, yeah, and now they're not accepting refugees, and of course with the junta, I think the junta. I have to track what's going on with the junta in Myanmar, but I believe they're losing a lot of ground, if I'm remembering right. So at least that's some good news. But
Yes,
again, the
that's
junta is
been
still
an
in
ongoing
control.
sort of thing. But it also remains to be seen how it will affect the whole uh, genocide thing.
Yep. And
That's
so the other thing, so the opposition, so Bangladesh's politics are kind of, it is a multi-party, parliamentary system, but it is heavily favored toward the Awami League. The Awami League has basically like a vast majority of the seats in parliament. They have 271 out of 350, so they have, you know, there's 350 total seats, and they have 271 MPs in Parliament. So that's a very high number. They also dominate 10 out of 12 major cities' local governments. So the Awami League it's basically a one-party rule at this point.
yes.
And so the opposition, unfortunately, is not much better because you have a tanky party, which they have very little support. The Workers' Party, they're basically the Marxist-Leninists of Bangladesh, and
So
they
what's
have a
the
really
difference
weird
between the
history.
Tanky Party and the Marxist-Leninist Party, if you could
No, it's
elaborate
the
on
same
that?
thing. It is that party. It's the Workers' Party of
Okay.
Bangladesh. They're like tanky Marxist-Leninist. They're also I have to read more into them, but they're a lot like most other ML parties. They have very anti-progressive positions, unfortunately. Um, and then the other major party, the Islamist party that is opposition to the Awami League, that has a little bit of clout, is the Jatiya Party, or Ershad. Ershad is they are Bangladeshi nationalists, but they're like hardline Islamist conservatives. So
Hmm.
that's the other problem with them, is that they are Islamists. So they would end up, not liking, that they would end up being very authoritarian themselves, even though they are, Awami's opposition. So
So there does not seem to
basically,
be a real alternative to the uh, authoritarian regime.
no. And so the problem in Bangladesh is, institutionally, there is no libertarian or left wing or even liberal opposition, really. There really isn't, and that's the concern I have with Bangladesh, is that, okay, yes, there will be this uprising against the government, and I don't know what will happen. Let's see. It's going to be very violent. I mean, expect. um I don't want to predict like where this is going to go as far as like civilian casualties, because I mean Bangladesh has had a very tumultuous history. Like I said, when it was East Pakistan, and before that during the British Raj, of course you got to remember the Bengal famine, or famines. There were multiple famines in the
Okay.
region caused by British mismanagement and trade policy. And so yeah, this region of the world has been very heavily colonized, genocided.
Yes.
It's been run by authoritarians forever, and it's like, how do we break the cycle? And I don't know. I feel like there needs to be some sort of new movement in Bangladesh. Like that's really their only choice going forward. And because really, again, there is no real liberal or progressive opposition to Awami or to Irshad. So or the I mean there is a socialist party, but they're kind of a joke. They have like no power, and I don't know. I haven't seen much from them, but who knows? Maybe I have to read more into their positions and you know and how whether they're any good or bad. I don't know, but
I guess
yeah, it's really messed up.
the real question is, given all that information, is what would need to happen for that sort of new movement to be allowed to be born? Because, as you've said, the so far the protest might just lead to a different flavor of the same thing taking over.
Yeah, and I really think what you need in Bangladeshi politics is something similar to what you're seeing in certain parts of India and Pakistan. So, for example, and I'll put his name in chat. This is a guy. This is someone you should look up. This guy is in Pakistan. His name is Amar Ali Jan. He is a young politician in his late 30s. He is very left libertarian in Pakistan, which is again a small minority. There's only a few like leftists in Pakistan who are actually trying to, you know, get into elections and start winning local and parliament seats. So Ahmad Ali Jan, he runs the party known as Hakuk e Khalq, which is that's an Urdu name, and so
Can you write it
that
down as well
party,
in the chat?
yeah, Hakuk e Khalq. I'll write down the anglicized version, but that's the party in Pakistan, and so basically they're like a libertarian left wing party that recently started, and they're trying to influence more locally. They're doing a lot of work on the ground with youth, you know, universities, schools. Young working people. So they're and in now they're even trying to get into more rural areas like, you know, villages and the like. So and working on farmers issues and stuff. So they're doing a lot of good work in Pakistan. But again, they're very small movement. But there's also another party in India, actually the part of India I'm from, which is Uttar Pradesh, the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. There is a movement, a new movement, a lefty movement started called the Azad movement. So Azad movement. And there's a guy, his name is Chandra Shekhar. Chandra Shekhar is and he changed his last name, you know, his because he has a different last name, but he changed his name to Azad, which is the word for freedom. Uh, uh, but he changed his name. Sorry, he changed his name to Azad. I mean, his actual last name I think is different. Let me look it up.
While we're looking it up, I guess I'll ask, because since this is
Yeah,
a new movement that is more left wing in the sense of being, I assume, more progressive and so on. Yes.
yeah, definitely
So,
much more progressive.
as a
It's this guy.
person, from there, would you say that you yourself would subscribe to that movement?
Oh yeah, I would. And he's against the caste system, so he wants to abolish the caste system. He's also he's very much in favor of workers owning where they work, so he wants more cooperatives and unions and worker ownership. He's also in favor of public education, full covered public education. Like a lot of the policies he wants are things that you and I would want. And so, yeah, this guy, Chandrasekhar Azad, his original name, I forget, I think his original last name was Das. Um, but he changed his last name for, you know, for politics. 'Cause usually, the thing with Indian politics is, and South Asian politics is especially people who come from lower caste or marginalized backgrounds, they will change their names because the reason they do that is because if they use their original last name, which also indicates caste, people won't like them. So by changing their name, there's they just get more visibility. It's just
Yeah.
again, it's a they just have to do that in order to get any clout and get any
Right.
movement going. But yeah, he
So,
is also from a marginalized background as well.
because I of
So
course
yeah.
assume you still have full voting rights in the place you're from. Yes.
Well, I don't because I'm a U.S. citizen, so I
There
can't
is
vote.
no dual citizenship
Yeah.
in India.
No, there isn't. But there is a thing called the Overseas Citizen Card. So I have the OCI card, which basically allows me to travel to and from the country as much as I want.
But you cannot participate in the
Um,
electoral system.
no, I can't vote. And I don't know how taxes work. Like if I were to buy, let's say, buy property there or start a business there, like I don't know how all that works, but the OCI card is basically like a permanent visa for people who were born in India or who are who are children of people born in India. So it's one generation basically.
Right.
Um, but that's what an OCI card is, and so I have that, and I can go to India as much as I want as a U.S. citizen. I don't need a visa when I get there, so that's the nice thing. But
Right.
yeah, there's no dual citizenship, and
I
I
was
believe that's the same for all other South Asian countries. They do something like that.
because I was asking in the context of if you were to want to support this movement by actually casting your vote, give
I
them.
wish I could. I would have to renounce, U.S. citizenship and permanently relocate to India. But yeah, in order to do that. But again, the whole thing is this movement, this sort of Azad movement that's happening in northern India. It's small, it's starting up, but I think it is an example of something where young people are quickly getting on board with it. Chandrasekhar himself is really, really active on social media, so
So
he's
that's
using that to
I
his
guess
advantage,
I
and I
guess
think that's helping.
that is a good question to ask in the
Yeah.
context of Bangladesh. Then, if do you believe that if such a progressive movement started in Bangladesh, that young people would be prone to sort of stand behind it and sort of get on board?
I mean, from what we've seen with the protests, and if you've seen any of the photos from news articles and news coverage, yes, I actually think there would be mass, or at least a large contingent of young people going that direction because of just how dire things are in Bangladesh under the authoritarian state. Poverty levels, access to food is getting worse every year. Inflation, incomes are lowering, costs are rising. So like I said earlier in chat, the reason Modi lost so much this past election, even though he won, it was like what do you call it? It was like it was like he barely won. Like he barely won his third term as prime minister, and so he's losing a lot of support. Parties that ally with him are now not as allied with him. They are starting to distance themselves. His alliance is falling apart. His own party, the BJP, which used to have a majority in the parliament, now is a plurality. So Modi's power this term is much more diminished than it was previously, and also his support is crumbling in many places. And the reason is because of India's economy being, so badly affected by everything he did. He and his government did. Since 2014, like they've made everything worse, not better, and they've only made things better for the ultra wealthy and the upper castes. So when you can't put bread on the table, people are going to look for alternatives, and that's why so many places in India flipped this past election and significantly weakened Modi's dominance. And in Bangladesh, I would suspect that a similar thing would happen. The problem is, who's your alternative? It's a hardline Islamist government. So it's a hardline Islamist party who is the main opposition. And so how do you flip that? How long is this going to take? Like the logistics of this are tricky to figure out. But I think what's essential to it is something like an Azad movement, or like what you're seeing in Pakistan with Hukuk-e-Khalq, which, and what Amar Ali Jan and other organizers are doing in Pakistan.
Do
So
you maybe
I
think
think
those
yeah.
there could be because They are all sort of the same sphere, so to speak. So do you think there could be people in Bangladesh itself looking at those examples and thinking maybe we could replicate that at home? Maybe we could start a movement that is similar to those. Look at what's happening there and here. Look what works and try to implement it here.
I would think so. And the thing in Bangladesh that's really hard to overcome is police and military force. How brutal it is.
I assume the
Um,
movement would have to, by necessity, start as an underground movement.
yep. Yeah, it has to be an underground resistance. It has to be, and I actually think the only the what needs to probably start happening, because you're kind of seeing this with the IDF now, right? The IDF in Israel. What's happening now? A lot of soldiers are defecting now because of the things they've seen in Gaza, right? The things the things they're having to do to innocent people in Gaza and the West Bank and in Lebanon, right? So there is more and more people defecting from the IDF and coming out and admitting that they're commanded to do these things to innocent people. So I think what what would maybe catalyze such a movement to start happening is if, say, police and military people would start defecting, like from and realizing that, and starting to join that movement. And so again, there's the whole debate of, should we allow cops in our movement, right? I don't think so. Maybe ex-cops who reject the institution, yeah, probably. But like, yeah, I think once that starts to happen, like those key authoritarian institutions, once people start defecting from that, that's really where it's going to gain a lot of steam. Now, the problem is in Bangladesh, unlike in Pakistan and India, where you have leaders of these movements like Ahmad Ali Jan, like Chandrasekhar. In Bangladesh, I can't really identify anyone, or maybe I have to look into it or ask some of my Bengali friends, like who is somebody you can identify as, say, like a movement leader, or people you would like. In the US we have the squad in Congress, right? Is there something like that in Bangladesh, in like the Bangladeshi parliament, or in sort of sort of leftist organizations or anything like that? So yeah, and it's so interesting because in the context of Israel Palestine, we were just talking about the IDF. Bangladesh keeps saying, and Sheikh Hasina herself has said that she supports the Palestinian people's right to statehood. Because again, Bangladesh is majority Muslim. So based on that, like on that basis, Bangladesh was, I remember a couple months ago, a lot of leftists were celebrating, oh, Bangladesh supports Palestine. And I keep telling them that, hey, that's optics. Once you look
Right.
behind the optics, Bangladesh, to its own people, and of course to refugees who have fled from other nearby nations, countries like Myanmar, Bangladesh in and of itself is doing the same things the IDF is doing to Palestinians and other minorities who live in occupied areas, right? So, and that shocks people that this is the case. I'm like, no, that's what they do. And the same with Iran. Iran says they support, the PLO or Hamas or whatever. And it's like, yeah, but look what Iran does to its own people. They're doing IDF level things to their own people. So
basically the actions do
yeah.
not match the rhetoric.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And that's my, like, a lot of people ask me why I am more libertarian, more anarchist in my point of view. I realize anarchism in itself probably needs some more maturing of its ideals and stuff. But like, the reason I am more, anti-state libertarian is because no matter the state, like, you cannot fully trust the state, right? You cannot fully trust the state. You always need a resistance movement on the ground. You always need mutual aid. You always need community organizing, unions. You always need these things in resistance to any state, even a state that claims to be, for good things like liberation of Palestine or
actions speak
claims to
louder
be center
than
left.
words.
Yes.
You need a solidarity movement in Bangladesh.
Yep. 1000%. And yeah, it's just, Yeah, Bangladesh is becoming a lot more like Israel is, in the way it's functioning,
Mm.
because it's so militarized. Pakistan as well. Pakistan said we support Palestine, but then Pakistan's, like, as a country, is so heavily controlled by its military, through the economy. The military and the government own so much land. They and so much of the country's wealth is centered in the military, and they're one of the most militarized countries in the world. And they have nuclear weapons.
Yeah, which
So,
of course
like,
creates the
yeah,
created the crises that sort of
yep,
were well known between, yeah, the
yeah.
nuclear crisis.
Um, But yeah, that's all I wanted to talk about today. I just wanted to bring forth, like, what's been going on in Bangladesh right now, what's the historical context behind it, some other critical issues that are happening in the region. And yeah, all I would say is, if you know anybody in your friend circle who is from this part of the world, who is from Bangladesh, or the wider Bengal region, who is, Bengali person, or Santali. There are many. The Bengali people are not the only people, by the way. There are many, indigenous peoples of this region. And in fact, actually, this is one thing as well. Bengali nationalism, in and of itself, like the whole, that was the whole movement that got Bangladesh to become an independent country to begin with from Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
The Bengali nationalism is not without its flaws. It is still very racist against non-Bengali peoples. So people who are, say, indigenous and who live in tribal areas, they are not well treated by, like, Bengali nationalists hate those people, and want to continue to marginalize them. So, Santa people are an example, and there's many, many other groups of people who Bengali nationalists hate. And of course, Bengali nationalists also don't want refugees in their country. So that probably explains the recent ban on refugees coming into Bangladesh. It's not merely like a numbers problem. It's actually like genuine, like, sectarian hatred of people who are not Bengali. So that's the problem with Bengali nationalism. It is ethno-nationalist in its construction. So yeah, Bangladesh needs a like, how do we get a country that is so steeped in ethno-nationalism to move away from that? And yeah, I don't know. Let's see what's going to happen going forward.
I think
I'm going to keep
it's
monitoring the situation. I hope all of you do too. Arun, by the way, I don't know. You probably all know about Arun. I see Bluestone here in chat. But Arunana, who is a South Indian, he's a streamer originally from South India. He's US based, but he covers a lot of this. He has been doing great coverage of what's going on in Bangladesh, and he's somebody. He actually became a Twitch partner recently, so yay, go Arun. So yeah, Arun has been doing good coverage. He's a good guy to go to. I recommend his content on the regular.
can
So
you link
and I try to do
in
my
the
part, but yeah.
can you link that person in the chat?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Everybody, let me link on YouTube as well. He does stream on YouTube, but mostly he's been doing it on Twitch lately. But yeah, Arun is somebody I highly recommend.
And yourself as well, of course.
Going to. And yes, and I plan to cover more about this as well, even though I tend to focus on North India, and I'm a little bit more focused on that because, I hear about things very soon, pretty quickly from there, because my family and people I know live there. But I do try to keep up with Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Afghanistan, these other parts of the region that do not get attention on the world stage. So
Afghanistan.
yeah, I appreciate
Afghanistan.
you.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, I appreciate you giving, the airtime for this, because yeah, it's getting covered in, like it's being reported upon in, like, news feeds, but people aren't paying attention to it. They're more
Right.
worried about Biden's health. And it's like,
Right.
guys, it doesn't matter if Biden or Harris or whoever becomes president. Somebody major in the Democratic Party will become president. Do not worry. We have to keep Trump out. That's it. But also, let's not be ignorant of Bangladesh, of Haiti, the Congo,
Mm.
Manipur state in India. Like, there's so many things you gotta. And I know people are looking at it, but it's like it's not getting the spotlight when it should. Um, so,
I wonder
but
if
yeah,
Euro.
Arun is.
I wonder if
So,
Euromaidan will happen in
uh,
Bangladesh. I think it's more complicated than that because
I don't
Had
know.
a very uh, Euromaidan had at least a few very
Hmm.
specific circumstances that allowed it to be what it was. I believe that the army, well, first of all, the army in Ukraine was not that big at the time to begin with, and the army was also not that eager to crack down on the protesters. That those are factors that are
Hmm.
pretty important to remember when it comes to these sort of
Yeah.
protests. Like a protest has a lot bigger chance of succeeding when the government cannot call upon, let's say, 400 tanks to squash the protests, right?
Yeah, and right now in Bangladesh, that is the opposite is the case, right? I mean, the police and military are full on, uh, are wailing upon the people, the innocent people of Bangladesh. So yeah, it's that's best case scenario. But again, at this point, Bangladesh is still a very nationalist, militaristic country, because of, I mean, obviously there was the resistance against East Pakistan, mainly in response to marginalization of Bengali peoples who lived in East Pakistan, and the obviously the establishment of Bangladesh, by the way, which was East Pakistan, was based on religious segregation by the British. Right, the British segregated Hindus from Muslims. And so that's why Bangladesh was so heavily majority Muslim, is because of that legacy segregation that the British introduced. So really, you can blame England all you want. We love to blame England. Here's yet another thing you can blame England on. But yeah, it's and now in Bangladesh, there's this whole like coalescing of people who are that are being that are having civil conflict sicked upon them by the government. And so now it's like, okay, where do we go from here? And I really, really hope they go in a more sort of left-wing libertarian direction, a liberal, hopefully at least more liberal. That's the first
Yeah,
step.
it
But
is.
like, I mean, it's very early right now. Like, the state TV headquarters just got burned down, and there's all this stuff going on, and all this suppression, and like we just don't know. I will
Because
never forgive the British. No, me
yeah,
either.
it's wanted to touch upon this a little bit actually, just because
Hmm.
the role that Great Britain has ended up having in many historical events, it has been uh, let off the hook, so to speak, on the fact that it was the empire that has committed one of the some of the biggest atrocities in history. I
Yeah,
think the estimation was, God, I'm not sure it was. It has been quite a while since I've looked at that article that has claimed that basically Great Britain has harvested a number of victims nearing
it's
500
like 100
million.
million plus, 100 million plus, right? It's something
I
like that
seen it in the
over its history.
hundreds of million,
Yep.
actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you count all the famines,
Yes,
the
yes.
and all that, like, yeah, and they were the Bengal famine was one of many famines. There were famines throughout the run of the British Empire, the British Raj. Like throughout its entire history, there were famines. Like
Yes,
it wasn't just a one time. It wasn't just
very.
like, which I imagine Ukraine has gone through something back. Tying back to Ukraine, Ukraine has gone through many famines too. It's not just the
That's
Holodomor was
right.
one of many, right? If I'm not mistaken.
At least two.
Wow.
There was a big famine under Lenin, and there was, of course, a big famine under Stalin,
Yeah.
and there was a one even later. Yes,
I
even
don't. Which was
though
it under Khrushchev or Bresh? Who was it under?
I'll
I don't remember.
have to check the third one, but it is
Oof.
very ironic that the country that is such a big sort of manufacturer of food, the breadbasket of Europe, of the world, I would say, has had so many famines. right?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, a lot of Ukraine's wheat goes to North Africa, Middle East,
In fact,
um,
Ukraine
Europe,
has
right?
contributed a significant amount of it recently for Palestinians.
Based. Really, really based. I like, yeah, I like that because I know I initially had concerns about Zelensky when he made early on in the when Russia invaded. He
Remember
was
that?
saying that he wants Ukraine to have like Israel level, security and like
Yeah, but
an
that's
Iron Dome and
understandable.
stuff. But he has had pretty good support for Palestinians recently. I do like to see that. Um,
I think he didn't mean it as
yeah.
in, he meant it like we have a neighbor, the type of neighbor that we have, so we don't have a choice. We have to have high security. I certainly understand this sentiment. Uh,
Yeah, I was concerned. But I guess yeah, taken out of context. Um, which
Fair
I
though.
guess he just wants like an Iron Dome to protect Ukrainian citizens, which that's fair. They have a
Yeah,
right to defend their country. So
against a
unlike
full-scale
Israel.
invasion. Yeah, like Palestine has not launched a full-scale invasion against Israel, as far as I'm aware.
I
Um,
mean now, like Hezbollah I think is dropping they dropped didn't Hezbollah drop
I know
rockets
that
down in Tel Aviv tonight?
The Houthis have sort of.
The Houthis. I thought it was Hezbollah, but it was the Houthis.
I heard it was the Houthis that sort of
That's really far. They went from Yemen. That's a really long range missile. My
apparently
goodness.
like a person in Tel Aviv was killed. At least that is what President Sunday told me when I called in. He said, "Guess what
Yeah.
happened tonight?" And that the Houthis have.
I have mixed feelings on the Houthis. Like, I'm glad they stopped a lot of shipments going to Israel, but then
Apparently,
and
they've been
basically,
even sinking Russian ships, which is pretty interesting.
yeah, they're kind of. But then when you're going after civilians like that, that
Yeah.
rubs me the wrong way. Like, don't do what Israel's doing. Don't paint yourself with the same brush. So yeah, I don't trust the Houthis entirely.
So here we
And
have
the Houthis seem a little anti-Semitic too. I don't
right
know.
the Kyiv Independent. Ukraine sends Palestine 1,000 tons of flour in first tranche of food aid.
Wow, that's. I mean, that's how many trenchers are they gonna send? Like that's wow.
That's a
That's
good question. Maybe
especially
we'll go over the article tonight about this. I think it's very good,
yeah.
especially
We can go
since
over it.
yeah. Would you like to go over it together now?
Yeah, sure, sure. I because now that we've kind of switched topics, although I wanted to respond to Philippe in YouTube chat. Philippe says just as Netherlands funneled money through Lucy Aze to manufacture Euromaidan against the will of the Ukrainian people, you chatters can use her once again to astroturf a Soros-backed uprising in Bangladesh.
Hello, Estelle. Well,
That's amazing. uh,
I've been trying to grow my little humble stream. But there are people that come back. I have recurring viewers, which is always nice. Okay, I guess I'm gonna share screen, right? That's the.
sure, yeah.
Hold on, I have to sort of. Again, technical issues.
Yeah.
Hey, how do I?
Oh, Gabrielle's in chat. Hey, good to see you. Good to see you.
That's right. How do I share your screen? I want to share the article exactly. You then global chat. Ukraine sends. Go live. Can you see it?
Yeah.
All right. I'm gonna read it and we're gonna discuss it along the way, like a streamer family. So we read the title. Ukraine delivered 1,000 tons of wheat flour to Palestine, Ukraine's foreign ministry said on July 18th. The delivery was the first tranche of 3 food aid packages to be sent under a humanitarian program entitled Grain from Ukraine. So we have the answer to your question right off the bat.
So 3,000, at least 3,000 tons.
Yeah, it's not really specified if all of them are gonna be, and if all of them are gonna be, well, it says grain and the whole thing, so it's gonna be probably. The first package will be enough to feed more than 100,000 Palestinian families for a month, the foreign ministry said. Hunger has become a persistent problem in Gaza against the backdrop of the ongoing incursion by the Israeli Defense Forces. And I've also seen, which frustrates me to no end, how certain people who I do not believe really care about either Ukraine or Palestine will sort of do these very dishonest, strange comparisons between the war in Ukraine and what's happening in Palestine, saying, oh, this X thing happened in Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't have it that bad actually because Palestine, or whenever there's a commentator that speaks about Ukraine, they're immediately bombarded with questions such as, can you give us your opinion on Palestine? Or why aren't you talking about Palestine enough? You know? It's
Yeah, and then I would go to those people and say, why aren't you talking about Bangladesh enough?
yeah, it's like
But like it's but yeah, not to like and that's the thing is like I don't like how some people weaponize, Palestine, right, to try to get a rise out of people. Like that to me is a pretty disrespectful to what's, to the, to the people of Gaza and West Bank. And
yeah.
I don't, it's like why are you weaponizing that against people instead of, because if you do that you're pushing those people away instead of,
Yeah.
Like I like that, like people somehow, like I've also seen people make the distinction that because Ukraine is a because Ukrainian people are white, and that they don't deserve the same as they don't deserve the same amount of help as Palestinians. It's like, wow. I like there is like this element of racism to it, sort of, or sort of like this. I don't know, how do I put it. It's like people think, oh, because Ukraine is a majority white country, therefore it's, it gets more coverage than Palestine. I'm like, no, Palestine is getting a lot of coverage right now. Now the angle of that coverage is to be questioned, because the media initially was very pro-Israel, and they still are to some degree, at least in the U.S. and certainly in India. Indian media is very pro-Israel as well, because India is Israel's largest buyer of arms. If you didn't know that, the Indian army gets a lot of arms and munitions from Israel. But anyways, it's like, no, we like. Why are people playing oppression Olympics? I don't understand. Like, cover everything. Don't just say, oh, we don't need to cover Ukraine because Palestine is this is happening in Palestine. Like, no, we have to cover all of these things. That's like the problem with media, is they focus too much on one thing that gets viewers. They're not, reporting on everything. So it's nice to see.
Yeah.
It's nice to see that there's like, I guess, is this like an independent Ukrainian outlet, a Kyiv Independent, or I guess, or they're not state media, right?
No, I would say no.
Yeah, but it's nice to see that like there is this coverage of, what's happening in Ukraine, and
Actually, I have
like
to check
people.
now.
Yeah, they're
I
probably.
guess it's in the name independent.
Right.
They have to have a wiki.
I mean, I would think they're
English
founded by
an online newspaper, founded former staff of the Kyiv Post media consultancy. Yeah.
Okay.
Kyiv Independent. It's in the name, independent.
Mm. That's
But
good.
I suppose because there's also the issue of uh, the issue of people sort of having their you sort of cannot cover everything in depth, right? You
Mm.
sort of have your focus. Some people are even sort of enthralled in certain conflicts enough that they go to the place, uh, go to the front line outright, and sort of their main focus is sort of that thing, even if they sort of cover briefly other conflicts, they will never be sort of as much knowledgeable and as much sort of in, you know what I mean, right? There won't be as much in tune with what's going on with the different conflicts and the thing
Mm.
that they're actually directly sort of reporting on, right? So it is,
Yeah, there's people have their lane that they're in, right? Like you have certain things you've emphasized covering, whereas I'm trying to focus on South Asia, bring that to the limelight, and that's fine. But then when you weaponize, like there are people I see, like I'll see people who are very very focused on the Middle East and Gaza and West Bank right now. Why are you taking that and weaponizing it against other people who are reporting on who are reporting on other like genocides and other like occupations around the world? Like all of those need coverage, all of those need documenting, all of those uh you know people in all of those regions need our solidarity and help.
yeah,
So I don't understand this. I do not understand this distinction that people make. It's like all of it should have some airtime. Not only airtime, but like it should all be under equal consideration.
yeah.
So
And of
yeah.
course, while everybody has their own speciality, their own lane, so to speak, you can always cooperate with different people that have their own lanes and specialities, like what's happening here now. You are here and you can talk at length about certain topics that I'm just not going to be as knowledgeable about as you are.
Yeah, and that's why when I see you bring a lot of like I remember I was there the day you brought Shakespeare on, and she was talking about Latin America and Mexico, like that, like I go to her for a lot of what's going on there, or what's going on in Judaism, because
Mm-hmm.
she went to yeshiva and went through rabbinical school.
And my
So
Jewish
yeah.
history is sort of mainly focused in Eastern Europe, Poland.
Yeah.
Although, unfortunately, one could say that that history has been cut short.
Yeah, sadly, unfortunately, yeah, and we all know why. We all know
Yeah.
why. um, so,
Which, of course, directly led to what's happening in Palestine now, since
mhm.
Poland has been the second biggest community, Jewish community in the world before World War II, I believe. And the Polish Jewish community was not very fond of Zionism. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
was it mainly wasn't I know we're sort of I don't want to hot topics too much, but like a quick question on that. So, where would you say Zionism was in like the Jewish diaspora? Where was it most supported? Was it like the UK because of
I
the
would say
Balfour
Western
Declaration,
Europe
or?
was far more open to it. Like in,
Mm,
because in places like Germany, I'm not sure about the UK. If Karas was here, could elaborate on Austria-Hungary a bit. But
mm,
I know that Jewish people were a lot more assimilated, sort of living as sort of people of the countries, a bit less. And the idea of Jewish people becoming a nationality like the Germans, like British people, etc., became far more pronounced. In places like in Poland, it was a lot more complicated, you could say.
mm,
There were people that were assimilated into Polish society, but there were Zionists, of course, in Poland, but there were not very. It was a niche movement. There were many people that basically wanted what I would say call emancipation. They wanted to not assimilate. They wanted to keep just being Jewish, but at the same time, they wanted to treat the place they were in as home while being Jewish. So without needing to become Polish, so to speak. And there were many, you could call it a whole society with many people who were just not very wealthy, only spoke Yiddish. There
Mm.
were many religious Jewish people, which already was a non starter when it comes to Zionism. There's this interesting book which is actually written by a person who has a pro Israel bent, a person, a war journalist, actually, a pretty well known Jewish Polish war journalist that went to interview people that took part in various genocides, like the Rwanda genocide. He interviewed people who actually went with the machetes and chopped up
Oof.
people to bits in Rwanda. It's that's I could go on a whole tangent about how people that commit genocide see themselves as fundamentally moral people, but um, this person wrote about how a close associate to the father of what we now know as Zionism went to Poland. A close associate of Herzl went to Poland, and he said that Polish Jewish people are just very weird. That the assimilated upper sort of class Jewish people basically said that any enlightened Jewish people would find the idea of Zionism disgusting. And
So it was just like this very bottom of the brain, like, sense of nationalism basically
it was sort
that
of like,
Herzl was going for.
yeah, and the poor people,
Oh.
the person, the associate would say that it was baffling before, because the poor religious people would pray um, 3 times per day and sort of look in the direction of Zion, But when proposed that they actually move to Palestine, they would suddenly resist very aggressively, you know?
Well, I guess maybe it's because from what I understand, and I know like there are in talking to some people who are come from like Orthodox Jewish backgrounds, various Orthodox backgrounds, they basically say that the exile from the land is still in effect, basically. Like, is that from? Do I understand that correctly? Like,
Well, like, so
people who didn't want to go back.
technically speaking, the return to Israel should happen once the Messiah comes. So,
Right, yeah, which is the what Christians also believe that.
but there's
So
also the
yeah.
aspect that there are many aspects of this. There's the whole Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth,
Yeah.
during which the Jewish community was actually biggest in the world. So at least many people claim that's the case. During which, and that's undisputable, that during that period, the golden age of Jewish people in the Commonwealth, um the community basically decided that there will never be a need to return to Israel. Like that the Messiah will probably just come to the Commonwealth and it'll be just fine. That was actually the
Yeah,
mainstream belief, that there's no need to return anywhere. It's fine. We're here and it's all good.
interesting. Yeah. So for context, anybody who doesn't know, I am Christian. I grew up evangelical, but I left evangelicalism, was atheist for a while, and now I'm a very like progressive, left wing, type of Christian. I adopt some ideals of Christian anarchism, but I'm also kind of wary of some of it too. So I don't know. I'm in a much more progressive direction. So, but my grandfather in India was a bishop. He was a Methodist bishop for a long time. So Yeah, I do have clergy clergy there are clergy in my family. Um so yeah. Um the Yiddish Bund movement. I mean, wasn't there the Labor Bund in Poland, right? Like before the USSR was established.
Yes, the
Um
Bund was in the USSR and in Poland, and the Bund was destroyed in the USSR. Uh,
that's right. Yeah, because the Bolsheviks destroyed it, right? If I remember,
yes.
I read about it a while ago, but
Uh, yes, and that enabled the Bund to flourish in Poland, which was actually another huge branch of um, anti-Zionism, because the Bund was very, very anti-Zionist, because
mm,
the Bund um, I'm sorry, I have to write something real quick. The Bund basically had this. There's this famous Jewish author, Isaac Bashevis Singer, and he basically described Poland as it was back in those days, and he described the big slogan that the Bund had, that why should anyone move to a desert place where people already live when we can create better conditions for the workers here, you know?
base. I love it. I
That
love it.
was like Isaac Bashevis Singer himself was not very fond of the Zionist project, and he was not very liked in Israel as well, because he insisted on writing his books in Yiddish, in none other language.
Nice. So keeping the Yiddish alive. That's good.
Yeah, and he described in very interesting and detailed way how life looked like in Poland, the Jewish community, the customs, all of these things. Very.
That is awesome. I'd like to read that at some point. Is it in English or is it in Polish? Because I probably can't read it if it's in Polish. Um, I need the AI translation.
Yeah.
Probably it's in Polish. Um, let me see. Yeah, glitch master. Lucy was hiding behind the map of Bangladesh
It's true.
for a while.
How many people are we having? How many people are watching?
Mhm.
13
That's
people.
awesome.
Okay. All right. So I guess I have a few more quick topics with you.
Yeah. And
But
then
have we
I gotta go
finished?
soon,
Have
but
we finished the
no
article
rush.
actually? Okay. Let's finish the article
Yeah.
maybe first, right?
Yeah, let's yeah, so, sorry, we went off on a tangent, but so three tranches, a
Yeah.
1,000 tons each. That's awesome.
International aid groups and foreign powers have been delivering food aid to and other humanitarian supplies, but the UN estimated that Gaza needs more than 500 truckloads of daily assistance to help support the local population. Kyiv voiced support for Israel after it came under a deadly attack by the Hamas militant organization in October 2023. Tel Aviv's subsequent shelling and ground invasion of Gaza attracted harsh criticism from much of the international community, with the UN estimating the Gaza death toll to be over 35,000 people. President Volodymyr Zelensky said in June that Ukraine recognizes both Israel and Palestine as states.
I mean, that's a step. He probably can't go like. Let's just assume for a second that Zelensky is in support of a secular Palestine where everyone lives together. Like, I don't think he can publicly voice that because he'll make all of NATO angry, right? So,
Yeah.
and he needs NATO right now to fight off Russia. So he's probably, as Bluestone actually said it here in chat earlier, he can't afford to go against Israel too hard, but actions speak louder. So, yeah, good on Ukraine. So, because like again, I've
Well,
actually received criticism from some people, and you probably have too. I would imagine where people say, "Well, how can you support both Ukraine and Palestine?" I'm like,
very
that's
easily.
actually the most humanitarian position. If you think about it, it's the most humane position. So yeah, got a problem.
Right.
So, like, this isn't difficult.
You know. And what do you think? Maybe I'm not sure if we've discussed the Modi visit to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin.
Yeah, I think what's so India is kind of weird because so some this is where I think people need to understand a little bit. So India is not like all pro Russia. India is trying to be buddy buddy with everybody in the world.
Yeah. It
Uh
even said that
well, except
outright
China.
in the
Yeah.
security sort of conference.
Yeah, and they're trying to be buddy buddy with like the entire world basically. So the reason is because
Neutral.
so in India there's a lot of US and European investment into like the tech industry and into manufacturing and agriculture. So India cannot afford to give up its relations with Western nations. It has to bolster them, but then they also have this long relationship with Russia that came from the USSR because the USSR armed India's resistance to Britain. So and its independence movement. So yeah, there has been this long-term relationship, and it never really went away even after the wall fell down. So, and yeah, the Indian army regularly trains with the Russian army. There is a lot of arms exchange as well. I mean, most of India's tanks are modified T-90s from Russia. So, um, yeah, I mean, uh, and of course, a lot of rifles that India makes are based on Russian designs, like the Kalashnikov. So yeah, it's like not surprising at all that that he went there for a security conference. Like none of this surprises me.
Hmm.
Um, but that said, I am concerned that like
Yeah.
it's going like will it bolster Russia's effort in invading Ukraine? That's my real concern. And that's what I don't want India to do. But I don't know.
Hmm.
Yeah, let me look up some. I think you've been.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Yeah, I'm looking up about the. Well, and also part of it too was sanctions on Russia. So basically, because of the sanction on Russian oil, a lot of that supply got redirected to India. So India and China, I believe. So they are consumers of Russian oil as well. So. So there's like a multitude of factors.
Hmm. Sorry, I got a little bit distracted suddenly.
Oh no, no worries, no worries. Oh, apparently Zelensky, I'm reading a BBC article, but apparently Zelensky responded to that meetup of Putin and Modi. He said, quote, "It is a huge disappointment and devastating blow to peace efforts to see the leader of the world's biggest democracy, Modi, hug the world's most bloody criminal in Moscow
I
on
saw
such a
that.
day. So yeah, yeah, he condemned it like
Actually,
wholeheartedly.
India also responded aggressively to this comment of Zelensky.
Yeah.
I think Minister the ambassador of Ukraine has been called by the Indian government, I believe, to
Oh, the Indian
respond.
government's response is funny too. The secretary of the foreign ministry said, and of India's foreign ministry said, the bilateral visit this time is just a scheduling priority. What's also weird about India is they are a member of the Quad, which it's basically the US, Australia, and Japan, along with India, to counter Chinese influence in the Asia Pacific region. So it's kind of weird how they align with Russia on some things, but then also want to counter China. I, yeah, India's geopolitics are really hard to explain. I don't know why.
It's a form of neutrality, especially since India seems to want to build itself up as this major power as well, right? In global
Wait, Bluestone,
politics.
India refines the oil from Russia and sells it to America. So the Russian refinery was bombed by Ukrainian drones. That pushes even more oil to India. So India is basically redirecting oil to the United States because that is ridiculous. Yeah, and then the whole thing about, again, the whole like irony in all of this too is that a lot of Russia has been recruiting a lot of men from India to fight on its behalf in Ukraine, and so basically they tricked them. They tricked them into earning a great income, free housing and stuff, and so they will trick them and say, okay, we're gonna have you training in Russia, and instead they get sent to the front lines. So a lot of Indian men are dying on the battlefield. Because of Russia, what Russia does to them. Russia pushes these Indian soldiers to the front lines.
Mm.
So, it's and they're doing it with Cuban men as well, with men from many countries, Nepal, Cuba,
The saving,
Venezuela.
although we cannot know,
Yeah.
unfortunately, with countries with certain regimes in place, like
Hmm.
at least we could say that the silver lining of this neutrality thing is that at least India is not supporting Russia in the way that Iran is, or
Hmm.
North Korea, or less more discreetly um, China. Although there have been some dealing, oil related dealing when it comes to India and Russia, I believe, which is the main sort of fuel to Putin's war.
Yeah, greater range. Indians are being sent to fight in Ukraine for on Russia's side, obviously. And yeah, they're in like Russia is feeding like people from the global south to the front lines as cannon fodder, basically.
Actually,
Um,
there have been more and
it's
more
horrible.
countries that have started protesting against it. Interesting enough, more and more countries are going to Russia and saying, "Yeah, we're gonna ask you to release our guys early. We're gonna ask you to terminate their contracts early, and we're gonna in some cases we're gonna ask you to pay us compensation." I think that was the case with a country that's admittedly awful in its own right, Sri Lanka. But
There were,
they,
yeah, a Sri Lankan man and Bluestone's like continuing tradition abroad. I mean, that's a dark joke because we all know what Sri Lanka did to Tamil people,
well,
right?
did
And
continue
continue
to do,
to. Mhm. Like
continue
it's
to
like
do.
yeah, he just wanted to take it to Ukraine too.
So Sri
Uh,
Lanka actually demanded that the soldiers from there be released early from the.
Sri Lanka of all countries.
Yeah, they
I'm
said we're
shocked.
gonna terminate the contracts early and pay us. Yeah,
That's the last thing I expected from Sri Lanka. The last thing.
it actually has a very crazy GDP expenditure on the military. like
I mean, all those, yeah, Sri Lanka,
50% or
Pakistan,
something.
yeah, Pakistan's is something like that. Bangladesh's is probably similar. I'd have to look it up, but yeah, Pakistan, it's like Pakistan basically. There's so much expenditure on military. Wow. But then, like, you'll hear people say things like, "Oh, but isn't Ukraine conscripting citizens?" I'm like, "Yeah, they're being invaded. What do you think? What what else can they do?" Like, it's not the same. It's not a symmetrical situation at all. Like, what Russia's doing is they're using, they're taking people from the global south, putting them on the front lines as cannon fodder. Meanwhile, Ukraine is just having to defend itself, and communities are having to step up and defend themselves too in Ukraine. So it's like that's totally different from conscripting soldiers from the global south and exploiting them. And and I've also heard. I'll have to look up some more stuff, but I believe Bluestone, the Russian military doesn't communicate to the families back home. Like they find out through other ways that their son or whoever died in battle. Like the Russian military can't even do the right thing in letting the families know. Like it's just horrific. Um so yeah, yeah, I mean this is yet another way people in South Asia get exploited. Yet another way. Um But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I feel about the Modi visit to Russia.
And
That's, I mean, it's got hypocrisy written all over it, and it's just like Modi doesn't care that his own citizens are dying in battle for Russia. He doesn't care.
yeah, well, yeah. And Russia does this very cynically because it just wants to avoid using Russian citizens as much as possible. It wants to use prisoners,
Hmm.
violent rapists, and murderers who actually come back home later and as free men and do their thing again. There was this really disturbing video of the veteran of the Russian army who's been a criminal released that came back and sort of did his thing of there's a camera video of an elderly lady walking upstairs because this person has the modus operandi of going in front of an elderly person, kicking them down the stairs,
Ooh,
violently kicking them in on the head while they're down, and then mugging them. So yeah.
brutal, man. Absolutely brutal. Yep. So yeah, this is why, like, like I just hate that, like, Lucy, like you and I have to explain ourselves so much to people. Like, how can you support Ukraine and Palestine
Right.
and Haiti, and well, at the same time, like it's the humane position. It's the pro liberation
And
position.
the worst thing
So
is that even when
yeah.
people sort of there's another side to this. There are sort of people that focus war correspondents and focus on uh, Ukraine, and when they cover Israel, they will clearly show sympathy towards Palestine, uh, self determination and independence, but they will still be accused of being basically pro Israel.
Yeah, it's really yeah, it's just I think that this is why, the not only nuance but just properly, this is why I always side with, like, the perspective of the people. I think the people's perspective is greater than any government's. But yeah. um yeah, so I'm, even to this day, I still support the full agency and freedom of the Ukrainian people. So
Yeah,
yeah.
because there's
um
been criticism of draft in Ukraine, but the fact is that there's at some point there's only you have two alternatives with Russia, as we have learned through evidence of what has happened on the ground. You can do the not ideal thing of drafting people to the army, or you can have not enough people to defend the country, and you will have repeat uh, Buchas, Irpins, and Iziums. You will have more mass graves. You will have just more
Hmm.
oppression and death. Those are the alternatives, unfortunate as it is.
Yeah, there's no good alternatives, and like people say, well, the like I hear it still hear it today. People say, well, people need to stop killing each other there. I'm like, okay, then ask your favorite you ask your favorite dictator Putin to stop attacking Ukraine.
Yeah, to
That
leave.
that's literally it. Get out of there, and he's not. He's just continuing to aggress, and you know push that line of control. That's what he's trying to do. Um, so, like, yeah, we know who the aggressor is in this situation. It's not NATO. You know, NATO's not out here bombing, you know, neighborhoods and schools and hospitals. That those are Russian missiles. So,
Yeah.
yep. But yeah, yeah, I'm glad we actually went over this because, like, it's you know, even like I will admit that like a few months ago when like I was really looking heavily into Palestine and stuff, I even had my doubts about Ukraine because of the whole Israel comment that Zelensky made initially. But then I you know looked back, I reflected again, and I said, you know what? Yeah, it's Ukraine is not some like stooge. They're not Israel stooges. Like
Yeah.
they're not like these all out Zionists who want to you know who are like staunch allies of Israel. They're not like the U.S. So yeah,
There've been
and it's
so
good to see that they're
many
sending all this aid.
there've been so many awful conspiracy theories when it comes to uh Ukraine war and oh gosh. Like,
Ah,
have you
yeah, the
heard the
theories just go
conspiracy? Have
wild.
you heard the conspiracy that war in Ukraine is to deplete the Ukrainian population so that uh, Jewish people will be kicked out of Israel, and then they are preparing to create a new Israel in Ukraine?
What?
Yeah,
Who's posting this?
it's I believe that's a conspiracy theory that is championed by a Polish far right party called the Confederacy.
The Confederate. Yeah, that's us. Okay, that all tracks.
Um,
I was gonna say Nazbols are pushing that, but they would. They probably would. They'd run with it. Um,
there's also one
yeah,
more that Poland is not governed by Polish people. It is governed by a combination of Jewish people and Ukrainian people.
of course they're gonna be anti-Semitic and racist, right? Like, I mean, isn't I mean Poland in and of its like we'll have to talk another time about Poland because I've never been around Europe, so I'm not familiar. Like Poland, I mean, based on what you've talked about with the Commonwealth, I mean, Poland as a nation is like really diverse. Actually, it's not like this whole like the notion of like Polish identity is complex. It's not
It's very new.
a monolith,
It's very new.
from what I understand. Hmm?
And we have to understand that at the end of the day, Poland and Ukraine has been longer a single country than Russia and Ukraine, which also means that Polish is actually far more similar as a language to Ukrainian than Russian and Ukrainian, which is
I guess yeah, you can prove your point linguistically. So there you
yeah,
go.
because in like you can go to simple examples.
Mm.
Yes in
Mm.
Ukrainian is tak, yes in Polish is tak, yes in Russian is da.
Da and dak.
Dak? Quack
Oh no,
quack
no, no.
duck.
What is it?
Da.
Tak. So tak is
Tak is
yes and
Polish and Ukrainian. Tak.
tak,
Yes. And
and then da is Russian.
da is Russia. Or
Mm.
Polish thank you is dziękuję. Ukrainian thank you is dziękuję. Russian
Дякую.
dziękuję.
Okay.
Russian spasiba.
Спасибо, of course. It's completely different. I mean, probably different root languages.
So,
uh,
you know, and there's so many similarities, like goodbye in Ukrainian do pobaczenia. There is a term you can say for goodbye in Polish, which is do zobaczenia, which is just one letter away.
Wow. Okay. And then in Russian, I forget what it is.
I
It's different, right? I don't know.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
I believe it's different.
Mm.
Something.
Is it Das Vidanya in Russian? I think.
I think so.
I
Yeah.
forget.
Like
Yeah, Das Vidanya.
the like when people speak Ukrainian, I can
It is.
understand quite a lot. And the more people spoke Russian in Ukraine, the more I was like, you know.
Huh? Yeah. What do you? You could not pick out the words.
It was. I actually have this, I guess, power of being recognizable and memorable because sometimes I would go near a place where they sold certain food items and they'll be like, "Oh, you're the person from Poland. Hello, the person from days ago, the Polish person. So, do you maybe speak any Russian?" I was like, "I speak a little bit Ukrainian," and they'd be like, "Ukrainian," you know.
That's awesome. Yeah, I hopefully when things are safer, I mean that's a part of the world I want to travel to, and Poland, Ukraine, this that corner of the world is so. Because I have a book, I can't get to it now. It's across the room, but there's a book, and you probably have heard of it. It's written by a Harvard professor of European history who's actually Ukrainian. It's the book that Sergei Plokhy, I believe is his last name, wrote. It's called The Gates of Europe, and it talks about the entire history, even prehistoric, the history of Ukraine and like the Pontic steppes and all those different regions. So it's really interesting, and I bet there's probably something I haven't read through much of it yet, but I bet he's probably going to talk about the similarity of Polish and Ukrainian and
Yeah.
other regional languages. Like
Poland
I bet that
actually,
there's
believe it or not, has a special relationship with the Middle East. The Polish, Lithuanian Commonwealth, I guess, in general.
Was it with
And
the Ottomans
and
or
the
who was it with?
Ottomans, yes, because the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth nobility sort of wholesale took clothing, ornament, and many other cultural things from the Ottomans, which is why to Western Europe the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth outright felt Asiatic
Hmm.
and very,
Interesting.
there's this depiction that I often quote that the nobles in the Commonwealth felt exotic but inferior and wild, very Asiatic.
Of course, they wrote that back then. Of course.
And but there's also actually more recent history with the Middle East that Poland had as a nation state because Iran. Oh well, there's also going back that the nobles believed themselves to be the Sarmatians, and the Sarmatians they believed that were descendant from Persians.
Interesting. Okay.
So they
That's
believed to have like
wow.
roots there. And there's a very special history of Iran taking a huge amount of refugees during World War II, Polish refugees, of Iran establishing a whole educational system for Polish children in Polish, where they learned Polish history, Polish language, etc.
Whoa, I have to read more into that. That's really
There's
interesting.
a whole. I have a
Wow.
book somewhere in this room about this sort of thing that Iran actually did a huge thing for Poland during World War II.
And that was before the Shah, so that makes sense that they were more open. Because I mean,
Of course,
yeah,
a lot of
once the coup happened, right?
died along the
Completely
way,
changed.
but this sort of thing that happened when, like for the children, for example, the whole educational system was sort of that's something that the Polish government did not do for Ukrainian refugees, for example. Polish government did not create a whole robust Ukrainian education system for their children. Ukrainian children were basically just rolled into the Polish education system.
That must be very tough. The language barrier must be. I mean, it's similar language, but
It's
still, it's a
similar, but
language
it's
barrier.
still at the end
Yeah.
of the day, we have to remember a foreign language. So, in my opinion, um, the Polish government absolutely should have created a system for Ukrainian refugee children that would have been in Ukrainian fully.
Yep. There's a similar thing happening, and this is the last thing I'll end on because I have to eat now. I'm getting hungry. But the in southern India, if you go to southern India, where they speak more of the Dravidian family of languages, the Indian government tries to impose Hindi and Hindi primarily as a language as like a national language, even though Hindi is an Indo-Aryan language from the northern regions, and Hindi is like a modern twisting of older North Indian languages like Urdu and Awadhi and Hindustani. So it's like a modern invention, basically. And so the Indian government in schools and in institutions in southern India tries to impose more Hindi, but people in Tamil Nadu and Kerala, in Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka and the other southern states, they actively promote like speaking the regional language. So, for example, in Tamil Nadu, there's a huge focus on Tamil language, history, cuisine, culture, poetry, things like literature, things like that in the schools, despite the Indian government imposing Hindi as the main language. So there's a lot of resistance in linguistic resistance, I guess, in southern India against Hindi imposition. So that's good to see. I would love to learn a Dravidian language, but being someone from North India who speaks, Hindustani and stuff, it's like it's a completely different family of languages, and like it's completely different, like structurally, and even the pronunciation is difficult. So it's as if it is a totally separate language family, or pretty much. Compared to Indo-Aryan. So there is this very interesting north-south divide in languages in South Asia. So, but yeah, in India, there's like active move, like the government is trying to actively stomp out Dravidian languages, but in those states, the state governments are saying, no, we need to teach Tamil, we need to teach, whatever the regional Kannada, Telugu, whatever language is regional to that area, teach that in the schools and keep it alive.
Yeah.
So
lingual diversity is something that is very, very close to my heart. Since languages carry with themselves, in a way, a form, a way of thinking, of visualizing the world, a way of sort of abstracting the world, which sort of brings on a diversity of viewing the world itself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Lucy, it was awesome talking to you, going over several things. Hope you have a good rest of stream. I'm going to eat. My food's getting cold. So, but yeah, thank you so much. Shukriya, as we say in Hindustani and Urdu, we say shukriya. Thanks for having me on. And to talk about Bangladesh and solidarity with people of Bangladesh, Palestine, Ukraine, Congo, so many places right now that need our solidarity. Yeah. So yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
I will see you. Bye bye.
Yeah, I'll lurk in chat and I'll be back soon.
Bye bye.
Right, bye.
I'll turn this off. We turn this off. I have to disconnect. Now I have to turn myself back on. Oh yeah, since I promised someone to I promised to keep my scenes clean in the OBS to a friend who helped me.